Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up, Book 2 in the Dungeon Runner series. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and I, Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 11. Tibs remembered the damage to the walls of the long corridor as he stepped into it, but did let that distract him from potential danger. What Bardic had done to Stowe with the corruption had been horrible. That was in the past. That couldn't hurt him any more than it already had. Felt the essence ahead and counted his steps. While it still looked like the same corridor, it was a room, and the same number of steps separated what he felt from the room they just left as every other room before. He stopped before entering it, and Jackal stopped next to him. As Tib tries to make sense of all the essence sensed ahead of them. Jekyll extended a hand, then moved it sideways. They watched him move along the closest of the multiple lines of essence before them. I don't need that since I've said it. Well, what are you doing? He asked the fighter. I'm like you, I can't feel those things unless I'm almost touching them. Jekyll answered, then added, unless they're in the earth or stone. Those I can feel at a distance, like that bundle in the pool room. Really? Tibbs looked at the others and has nodded. I can feel essence through mine, Karina said. All I need to do is send it out, and I can feel how they interact. There's a lot ahead of us. I can't figure out what we're supposed to do. I just feel like it's just there to kill us. Shouldn't there be a way to get through it? There is, he still said. Tibbs sliced the essence trigger in with his hand, and spears traversed the corridor nearly faster than he could follow. It was like a wall of them moving from there and away. From here and away. Yeah, Jekyll said. That's made to kill us. Tibbs tried not to feel as defeated as his friend sounded. What is that? Kundar pointed to where the spears stopped appearing. There was a pedestal with the top angled toward them, and Tibbs thought there was a plaque there. On it. I think, Kirino said, studying it. Well, that's how we turn the trap off. Why put the thing all the way over there? Jekyll asked. By the time we can turn it off, we've already crossed the room. Maybe it's for when we come back, Tibbs said, trying to map out the lines and understand how the trap worked. There was a space behind what was effectively a wall of triggers. It's narrow, and there was an opening in the wall. I think that it's for the ones among us who happen. Oh wait, no, that's the same thing. I think that it's for the one among us, said, who happens to be smaller and agile. We can go through and turn it off for the rest of us. So the rest of us, who are large and clumsy, can walk without danger. Can traverse, can cross it without danger. I'm not. Oh, Jekyll said. Now that Tibbs understood the essence wasn't so much triggers as limits, he could make out the path between them up to 9 layers in, which was maybe a quarter of the way. It wouldn't be easy. The path was relatively linear for him, but it would require using the walls and getting under low triggers. Trusted Stowe that there was a path through the whole thing, but that it would. It was on the down. Tibbs was down on the floor as a twang registered and something flew over where he'd been. He looked around for who had been hit, and his friends were looking at Nez, lowering his bow. What did you do? Tibbs demanded. You have to try. And on the trap. Oh. Tibbs looked up the hall, and the essence wall was gone. How did you know? I didn't. I just figured that wasting one arrow on the chance it would be on the chance it would. Wait, I didn't. I just figured that wasting one arrow on the chance it would work was worthwhile. Jekyll moved his hand where the essence had been. It was. He stepped forward. Okay, still said, miffed. That wasn't how it was supposed to have been done. Just followed the fighter. You wanted me to get in there, step around, over, under, and over those walls, didn't you? He extended his sense as far as it went, in case Stowe had surprises for him. You and someone else. This is supposed to be an agility test. It was quiet. Though I guess it works as one testing cunning. It's not every team's as smart as yours. Some were way smarter, Tibs thought. On the other side, Tibs studied the pedestal. Like almost everything in the dungeon, it was stone. The plaque easily moved when he pushed it. If nothing else, Stowe would change that for their next run. If nothing else. This is how quickly I can forget that something is there. I don't need to repeat it. He joined the others at the entrance of the next room and tried to suppress a shudder as he remembered what had happened. He hadn't had the time to look at it properly the previous time, and it was larger than he remembered, larger than the rattling and bunny rooms. 8 columns held up high ceilings on each side and would provide a lot of blind spots for rattlings and bunnylings in the room to hide behind. At the back of the room, at the end of it, this path created by columns, three golems stood, one bigger brute with 2 big brutes on each side. So I changed them slightly. Bigger brute was more massive, while the big brute's leaner. He remembered them in pieces on the floor, Bardic throwing vials of corruption everywhere, still whimpering. Again he sounding scared. Then he did what he could to save his friend, and pain consumed him. A hand on his shoulder made him jump, but it kept him from stepping into the room. Will you be well? Robert asked, tone gentler than Tibs was used to. If this is too much, we are not required to step in this time. There will be other ones. Jekyll nodded his agreement, and Tibs forced himself to see the room as it was today. The grey polished stone of the floor and walls. The grey polished stone of the floor and walls. The floor had large hexagonal tiles in different shades of grey, while the walls had designs on them Tibs couldn't make sense of. Abstract was what Kirina had told him things like them were called. Stowe had survived. So had he. He owed it to both of them to finish the floor. I'm good. Jekyll smiled with pride, then looked to the room. We have rattling bunnylings and 2 types of golems. The smaller ones are big brutes. The larger is bigger brute. Fighter rolled his eyes. At least we don't have to worry about those whippers. Rats and bunnies we know we can handle, but they will be a distraction that lets those brutes reach us and might keep us from effectively defending ourselves. Ideas? The previous encounter we had with the smaller brute, as I said, showed we could hardly hurt it. We have all grown in power, but I still believe we should focus on the larger one as it will be the biggest threat. Now, Miss Hunters, we can't ignore the rattling and bunnies. There's a lot more of them, and if they gang up, they will tear us apart. We need to thin them first, then focus on the brutes. They aren't exactly fast, and the room is large. We should be able to stay out of their reach easily. Come on, Jekyll said, grinning. Udar said it. We're stronger than when that brute showed up to save Tibs. We've dealt with the rattlings and bunnylings easily enough. I say we run at the brutes, give them all we can, and then clean the rest out. Bernard glared at Jekyll. That is stupid. Mez is right. We need to remove the easier ones because they have the numbers to overwhelm us. Me and Mez can attack groups of them, but that's not going to do us any good if one of you is in the middle of them. I have no ways to make my attack ignore you while hurting them. So it's just a question of you figuring that out? Jekyll asked, and she glared harder. There could be traps, Mez said. Tiles do lend themselves to that, he looked at Tibs. He sensed what he could of the room. I don't sense anything like that. There aren't any warren under it within what I can sense. But the dungeon knows my range. Stone knows But the dungeon knows my range with stone is very short, so he could have put that further in. Same with me, not sensing bunnylings onto the floor. He knows how far I can sense them. There are no essence triggers or normal ones, is it? I don't think we can have traps since it's got creatures. It's been one or the others. Still remains silent. Still remains silent. Can you tell if some of the tiles can be flipped open? Karina asked. Let's consider how he might be able to tell. Then to do that. Then shook his head. Unless there's a mechanism, I can't know what the tile can do. The first 4 around us have only more stones beneath. That's all I can say. And other than colors, they all look the same to me. If they start jumping out, I'll look for a pattern. But that's only going to help us next time. If the dungeon doesn't change things. That's it. I count at least 30 of the rattlings and bunnylings, Jekyll said. 36, Kandar said. How do you count them so fast? Jekyll looked at the massive mixed creatures, and with them moving. I have noticed that 12 seems to be a significant number for the dungeon, although I do not understand why. There's 12 light stone on each walls between the entrance and the first room. 48 of the floor tiles in the trap room have triggers, 24 rats in the boulder rooms, 12 before that, 24 rabbits and 12 rats in the watering room. 1 whipper, Jack countered, grinning. A boss creature. Jekyll frowned. 5 whippers on the second floor, along with 19 rats. The fighter counted on his fingers. That's 24. The encampment and bunnyling rooms? I have not been in a position to be able to count the ratlings, as many of them hide among the tents for Tibs and Karina to deal with. And the bunnylings are still enough of a danger I have focused on fighting them, instead of counting. I suspect the number will be 36 or 48. 36 bunnyling, still said, surprised. 48 ratlings. How did I never notice? I'm always using 12s. Ganny? Tibs didn't bother confirming what Kandar had worked out. Now that Stowe was aware of it, he would make changes. I still say we. Tibs glared at the fighter. Jekyll sighed, then nodded, turning to study the room. All right. The 3 of us engage and keep the horde busy. We have a lot of room, so we make use of it and give Karina and Mez as many chances to take them out in group, while keeping an eye out for the brutes and letting us know where they are. Once we have thinned the horde enough, you can start taking shots at the brutes in preparation for us attacking them. Tibbs took his knife, looked at them and the creatures. Maybe he could grab one of their clubs or a stone sword and give himself more range. How quickly could he unleash his X attacks? So many things needed to practice. He followed Jackal and Commodore into the room, and they split apart. Instead of splitting into 3 groups, the rattling and bundling divided into 4. One for each of them, and carrying out Mez, Jekyll called, but the explosion told them the 2 were aware of what was happening. Tibbs ducked, blocked, parried. Tibbs ducked, blocked, parried, and cursed. The first set of claws easily digging into his ice armor and added earth to it again. They were too fucking close. Sliced, stabbed, and shoved, trying to give himself space for a next. But they were too close and used any opening he gave them. Should have stayed with Karina and attacked only at a distance. It wasn't like he'd run out of water essence anymore. Tibbs, Bess called, jump back. Karina called for Commodore. Tibbs did so and kept retreating, managing an axe into the pursuing mass that took out a ratling. Then a flaming arrow hit the ground before them and exploded. Creatures flew in all directions, and those still in one piece immediately got to their feet and took up the chase again. And took up the chase. Grinning at half of them not getting up, Grinning at half of them not getting up, Tibs ran into the fray and immediately cursed himself as his ice and earth armor was chipped away to the point he received injuries. He should have remained at a distance, had to stop thinking of himself as a close-range fighter. The last bunnyling fell, and Tibs put his hand on his knees, catching his breath. He wanted to go help. He could hear fighting still going on. But he'd used up his fire reserve, making his knife deadlier, as well as his earth, and after that, he'd been constantly replenishing his ice armor as the corruption made it so brittle it broke nearly on contact with frost. The one good thing out of this fight was that his body hadn't betrayed him to the corruption. Straightened once the amulet was filled, only Jekyll was fighting. Body turned to stone, the amount of rubble around him an indication of the horde, as he called them, had considered him the larger threat. A leaping bunnyling shattered under a kick. A rattling broke under the strength of a punch. Jekyll grabbed another and used it to bash a bunnyling. He grabbed the last one and broke it over his knee. The creatures had been right. Jekyll was the bigger threat. If any of them had been made with a survival instinct, they'd all have fled instead of taking him on. His friend was a scarier fighter when he stoned up. His friend was a scarier fighter when stoned up like he was. Clunky, but it works. Tibs opened his mouth to congratulate the fighter, but the ground shook in time with a ponderous slam. It happened again, and Tibs turned to face the brutes, who were only now moving. Bigger Brute was in the lead, the ground shaking as his massive foot came down slowly. The other two trailed behind it, but stepped lighter, if not faster. If anyone needs Tibs to heal them, hurry, Jekyll called. We aren't getting long before they reach us. An inventory of his injuries told him they were all minor, cuts and bruises. Fatigue was his biggest problem, and he couldn't do much about that. Maybe they should keep the healing potions for this point in the dungeon. He had felt more alert after drinking it. Jekyll looked fine. He seemed impervious in his stone form. Kandar shook his head when Tibs offered. How are you two on essence? Jekyll asked, as Mez and Kirina joined them. The archer patted his bow. I'm good. I'm low, Kirina said. I need either another amulet or to be more careful about how I use my essence. Then you stay behind, Jekyll said, cutting off Tibs. If you run out, you go by the exit in case we need to run. No arguing, he snapped as she started protesting. Not losing the team sorcerer to stubbornness. Faced the approaching brute, grumbling about this being the one time he wished Stone was in his team so he could throw him at the enemy. Tibs chuckled as he sheathed his knives. Mez had the time to raise an eyebrow at the action before Tibs pulled one and flicked it at Bigger Brute. The water jet splashed without visible effect, but he was proud to have thought about it. Mez shot fire arrows after fire arrows, leaving scorch mark of the brute. The ground shook again as another foot came down. Tibs kept flicking water at it, then did an X attack and nearly drained himself without more than a few flecks of stone flying off to join those Mez had caused with the arrows. Tibs went back to flicking water as he refilled the amulet, trying it with two knives, but that threw his aim off. The air blade hit Bigger Brute's face, shearing off part of it, but it didn't affect his approach. Your turn. Our turn, Jekyll said, punching his palm. You take the left, keep bashing it with your staff. Your stall? With your staff. The moment it focuses on either of us, we draw it away so you three can keep attacking. If the smaller ones join the fight, you guys will have to keep Bigger Brute busy. You guys will have to keep Bigger Brute busy. Jekyll stepped to the right with a deliberateness that Tibs felt should cause the ground to shake. He got out one jet of water before Jekyll and Kandar were in striking range. Instead of the darkness trailing his staff, as with his previous attacks, it amassed at the end, forming a point that cut deep into the golem. The cleric swung as BB raised its arm, and the dark edge sliced through the elbow, causing the forearm. the forearm to fall to the ground. Komdar hurried back as BB turned its head in what Tibs could only think of as an angry glare, even if he had eyes. Your turn, Jekyll called, also stepping away. His strikes didn't have the effectiveness of the staff, only leaving cracks against the golden stone where the punch connected. Where the punches connected. Tibs did an next attack, working to control when he cut off the flow so it wouldn't drain him, but it was distracting by the accelerating Big Brute. The attack hit Bigger Brute, and Tibs was panting again, but forced himself to watch as he hurried to refill his reserve and amulet. Once they coordinated their attack, Tibs couldn't see how they'd win this. Instead of attacking Jackal or going for the still returning cleric, Big Brute threw itself at Bigger Brute and broke into rubble. Tibs stared as he felt the essence move into the larger golem. Some of the new rubble were forming the arm instead of falling to the ground. What? Jekyll demanded, staring too. Oh, fuck. Rena cursed. Keep fighting, Mez yelled as Bigger Brute took advantage of the surprise and slammed an arm into Jekyll. The fighter blocked, but the impact sent him across the room. Kirina, Tibs, whatever you have left, we need to take out the other small one. We can't let them pull this trick a second time. With only one opponent to focus on, Bigger Brute sent blows after blows against the cleric, and Komdar deflected them, the darkness over his staff causing the fist to slide away instead of impact. With his attack being ineffective, Tibs ran toward the cleric, as some of the blows still seemed to stagger him. He cursed Stowe under his breath for cheating, but the dungeon didn't comment, which was good. Tibs wasn't sure he could stop himself from arguing, and now was not the time. Jekyll was at his side, screaming in rage. Tibs took out his knife. Tibs took out his knives, made a water slide and used it to get between BB's legs, slashing at him as he slid by. His knives bit deep, but unlike with people, the golem kept moving, keeping up with Komdar's retreat. The next blow didn't deflect away from the cleric, the stone fist sliding and connecting with the man's shoulder. Komdar didn't react more than to move to a one-handed hold of his staff, but the break in the essence was clear to Tibs. Jekyll landed on the golem's back as Tibs hurried on their side. The fighter punched it in the head, and stone flew away with each impact. We don't. Komdar protested as Tibs placed his hand on the shoulder. Shut up! Tibs poured his essence in and shaped it around the injury. You can't fight with only one arm. The bone was shattered in the shoulder and the arm. It was a good thing a cleric would heal him afterward, because he doubted that even with his splint he could heal. It would heal properly. He tightened it into place, then hardened the essence and focused on the fight. Jekyll flew over them, but BB's head was a mess. Half of where the face should be was only broken stone. Tibs flicked water there. Even if the eyes weren't visible, it needed to see. If he could break the other half, it would be blind and easier to defend against. His attacks splashed without obvious effect. Maybe his aim with the water jet was no better than when he drew knives, so he needed to stick to larger targets. One advantage his water-flicking had over knives was that he could keep trying instead of having to worry about running out of knives. Tibs, Komdar said calmly as he stepped before him and deflected a blow that could have taken off his head. Move away. Tibs did as told. The remaining Big Brute kept approaching, slowed by the barrage of flaming arrows Mez shot at it. Kirina was by the exit, looking worried and scared. Komdar dropped to a knee, blocking an overhead hit. The Jekyll slammed into the golem, staggering it away. The fighter's essence was broken in multiple places, but his stone body seemed to keep everything together. Tibs had to step further away, and each punch sent stone flying off Bigger Brute. Jekyll's fist was covered with spike that left gouges into the golem. Big Brute was still advancing, and despite Mez's attack, it still had a lot of essence. Unlike with his friend, the golem's essence didn't break as a result of his injuries. Didn't match it didn't match any it didn't match an internal structure. Some of it simply flew away with the chunks of stone. Tibbs hadn't kept track of how much damage Bigger Brute had received, but a visual check told him it was significant, but nothing if Big Brute reached it. Tibbs stepped further aside and took out his knife. He pulled essence out of around him as he channeled water into it, refilling what he took from his amulet. Cleared his mind of the danger his friend was in, his anger at Stowe, and his anger at Stowe. Focused on the flow of the essence through his reserve and traced the axe. He stabbed the center, and the watery jet materialized, and immediately his essence dropped. It wasn't as fast as before, but still faster than he could replenish it. He hit the golem, but didn't cause damage. Could see, and he was too busy to sense it. But that didn't matter. What he had to do was ensure he could keep the jet going. He took hold of it and diminished its intensity, forced it to use less of his essence than he was pulling in. It was hard. The flow was raw, strong, like what he thought a waterfall was, based on how the one in the cavern sounded. But it responded, and he smiled. Yes, he thought, and his control broke. His reserve drained, and he dropped to a knee. He tried to pull more in to restart the attack, but all he could do was breathe, try to slow his pounding heart. When he finally heard something other than that, it was silence. No, panting. Other people panting. He looked up, around. Serena was next to Mez, holding him up. Commodore was lying on the ground, breathing. Jekyll was standing eerily still. Tibs rushed to his friend. Jekyll, are you okay? He sensed his essence. Couldn't stop the gasp. No, the fighter said through gritted teeth. How? There was nothing in Jekyll's essence that wasn't broken. Well, he closed his eyes. I'm not dying here. I'm not putting growth for losing me. Tibs tried to think of something he could do, but the damage was so extensive. Even his stone body was cracked and was missing pieces in place. I don't know if I can split everything that's wrong. Don't. Jekyll, you need to. Your essence stops me from using earth to make my body stone. My body to make my body stone. Stop. And Tibbs sensed the earth essence Tibbs sensed the earth essence move from the ground and into the fighter. I have to keep refilling myself with earth to maintain this, Tibbs. Don't worry, Cleric will heal me. She has to. But I'm not sure how Crow's going to feel about me being made of stone all the time. He grinned. Of course, there is one part of me that being hard all the time would. Skag, which Jekyll laughed and groaned. You cheated, he yelled at the ceiling. I didn't. Stowe replied. Tibbs pointed to the rubble. You healed Big Brute. You can't. I just did for them what you do for your friends, Stowe said calmly. Tibbs tried to contradict him, but he was right. Tibbs had done it first, and Stowe had never prevented Tibbs from doing it. If he didn't consider it cheating, Tibbs couldn't either. He looked at his friends. They were tired, injured, but alive. They survived. And based on that, on the chest at the back of the room, BB had been the boss. Someone go check on the loot, Jekyll said. I'd love to be the one to do it, but I'm worried that if I move more than I have to, I might fall apart. He looked at himself, quite literally. And this concludes chapter 11 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, give it a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the joy. Let your friends know this story exists, that you can listen to it and laugh at my mistakes. If you want to read it, you can do so on Royal Road. Book 1 is also there. The link's in the note. If you want to support me, my Patreon is also in the note, and you can get to read this story ahead about 3 weeks, as well as a lot of other stories I have written and am writing. And if you want to watch me do this live, as well as write, you can do that on my Twitch, also in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.